Welcome to the Standard of Truth podcast. In this podcast, Dr. Gerrit Dirkmaat and Professor Richard Leduc explore the early history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the life and teachings of Prophet Joseph Smith. They examine the original historical sources and provide context for events of the past. They approach the history of the Church with faith, expertise, and humor.
Hi, welcome to a special bonus episode of the Standard of Truth podcast. We thought maybe we would put this out there for those of you who are wondering what's going on. Richard, maybe you could give us a little bit of a brief background.
So we've received a lot of emails and
we always receive a lot of emails.
We've received a lot,
dozens all at once.
Yes, saying, "Hey, we got one meme that was very funny." So the episode that dropped on Thursday, it sounded like we recorded it in Gerrit's bathroom, possibly a cave or an abandoned swimming pool.
I thought it was maybe a mine shaft.
Well, we did get a meme from somebody where we were recording in a cave.
Yeah, David whipped up a meme of us sitting in a cave recording with podcast equipment, and also made us look like we were camping.
Which we obviously never would.
We wouldn't be camping, nor would we be in a cave.
So what happened is that when we record these things, we listen to them, make sure that the audio is good, and then we process it through
the content. We clearly don't care about at all.
We're not going to do anything. Yeah, we're never going to do anything about the content.
We listened to the audio and we're like, well, should have done a better job with the content, but at least it doesn't sound like you're in a well.
So when we processed the audio file was corrupted, and we didn't know that. When we because we listen to the original audio file, and then we go through and process it. Yeah, and then we upload it. And apparently that file had been corrupted and sounded like an insane echo was going on. And so we heard that early going on. Now at the time, Gerrit was in the happiest place on earth, and I was in the second happiest place on earth. And
Wisconsin. No, not Wisconsin.
No.
Oh.
I was in Peru. So I was in Peru, somewhere near Lake Titicaca, and Gerrit was in Disneyland, and we're like, oh, the audio's terrible. And so what we did is now Gerrit, you'd be surprised that the hotel internet that I had was not as high speed as they may have advertised. And so it took a minute, but we quickly got that file down. And then we fixed it and uploaded the new one. But if your phone downloads, if you set it to download automatically, which we recommend millions, we highly recommend, then even though we replaced the audio file, your audio file still sounds super echoey and terrible. And it sounds so bad that it's so distracting you probably didn't listen to it.
No, we had several people email saying, I tried to listen to it. I can barely stomach you when I can hear you normally. I've been wanting to stop listening for a while now, and this gave me the reason. But yeah, so what you need to do is you need to delete the downloaded file off your phone. So the reason why, even though we fixed it, people who are just streaming it, they're getting it fine because we fixed it almost immediately after it dropped. But if your phone auto downloads, then it auto downloads it as soon as it drops. And so you have to delete the episode off of your phone and then re-download it, and it'll sound normal. So if you're wondering, I'd love to learn more about, the witnesses of the Book of Mormon. And I assume that there's some kind of content in there that's not terrible. But I don't want to listen to, Gerrit, yodeling from a Swiss Alp while he's doing it. Just delete the episode and then re-download it, and it should be fine. So we thought we'd get on there, and it's General Conference weekend, and so hey, maybe we just give a few thoughts about conference. Richard, what were you impressed with?
Well, I mean, I was impressed with how often our podcast was mentioned during General Conference.
0 times.
So I don't know. Elder Brent H. Nielsen of the Presidency of the 70, he talked about the standard of truth. And I assumed when he was talking about it, he was talking about our podcast. He didn't say us specifically, but he did say the word standard of truth. So I assumed
because he's quoting Joseph Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so I assumed that was, it was an
Easter egg.
Yeah. And obviously when President Nelson talked about the Kirtland Temple, we've got a tour going there. I assumed that was also a little Easter egg for the listeners.
It is pretty awesome that he got on and talked about us acquiring the temple and about the keys that were restored there. It was a very interesting thing, Ed, that I thought, it's not a very intelligent commentary for me to make, to be like, yeah, I thought that like what the apostles and prophets said was like really important. Yeah, kind of. At the risk of sounding like an idiot in doing that, so much of the antagonism towards the church today, or the questions that people have regarding the church, there's just a lot of people. I was talking to a friend of the show who was asking a question about about someone he knew who was struggling with their faith. And it brought up the same thing. Well, this person, thinks that, Joseph was right about some things, but he was wrong about a lot of other things, and just thinks the church should do X instead of Y. And I love the fact that Conference focused on the fact that first and foremost, like Elder Kieran spent time on, hey, we believe in universal salvation, right? This is what President Oaks talked about. This is what Brigham Young and Joseph Smith talked about. And we sometimes forget that when we're talking about, getting the celestial kingdom, we aren't talking about, like every other Christian is, about everyone else writhing in an eternal hell that is, the only change is when more briquettes are added to the barbecue, and maybe some of that, some of the flavored wood to get that really good scent as you're being cooked up for eternity, as Brigham Young said. And that why do I need the church? Why can't I just be a good person and believe in God? Well, you can. Of course you can just be a good person. And that's great if you're a good person. But that's not the purpose of the church. And as President Nelson's talk really kind of hammered home. Part of the reason why I think you see this falling off of the cliff of membership in other Christian churches, where you see, I know that you have an antagonistic / anti-Mormon friend who wants to tell you all the time, yeah, the church is just like losing members right and left. Everyone's leaving. The church is collapsing. Well, look, are our numbers growing as fast as we want them to? No. But, growing at 2% is a lot better than shrinking at 5% year over year, which is what many other major mainline religions are doing anymore as people turn away from religion generally. And so the point that President Nelson made, prophetic as he is, obviously, was if the church only exists to do charitable work, to distribute charity to people, and to, provide, a social function, well, there are lots and lots of other things that do that. That's not the church does it, but if that was the only thing the church did, it wouldn't have, as he pointed out, eternal implications. And even went so far as to say the church is the only organization that affects your life after this life, and not just people's lives in this life. And frankly, I think that that's what's driving a lot of people leaving traditional Christianity. A lot of it is many mainline churches have done a good thing in turning, they are turning themselves into charitable organizations that are building, orphanages in Africa, and they're talking about how they can involve themselves in social justice issues, and they're doing all kinds of things that are good. Don't mistake me, they are good things. But the reality is, if the reason why you're going to church is because you want to feed starving children around the world, well, there are all kinds of charitable organizations that aren't churches that are way better at doing that, because that's what their entire purpose of their organization is. And I think that that's a really key thing for people to understand. Hopefully that's a takeaway they get. It's the keys of the priesthood and the covenants that we have that allow us to move from salvation to exaltation that make the difference. And so when someone says, well, what difference does it make? I can find God just by going up to the mountains. Of course you can. But our church doesn't exist for you to find God. Finding God is something you're already going to get. Our church exists to make you like God. And that is a very key difference. It's not just knowing about God, it's knowing God. And making covenants is the way that we do that. So, I mean, and President Oaks reinforced that with his talk. I have really loved the teachings of the men and women in the Quorum of the 12 and in the general presidencies lately. They have really spoke to my heart, really touched me. And there was one major disappointment, however, and that was that Spanish Fork did not get a temple. But Lehigh got another one. I know.
Lehigh got one. My wife was very excited about Edinburgh.
The one in Scotland, yes. I mean, that's
very cool.
That's a big deal. I mean, they got another one in the Salt Lake Valley, another one in West Jordan. So another temple, another one in Salt Lake Valley. But we still bide our time. We wait, and we like the pioneers of old, yes, continue to trudge the nearly 25 minutes by car, depending on the traffic, to the Payson Temple.
It's very funny. The explanation and distinction that President Nelson gave was beautiful. I listened to this a couple of times. President Oaks, the end of President Oaks' talk was very impactful to me. I've pondered on it again and again, knowing that if anybody needed to know something from President Oaks about the temples, I did. Or how to act, I did not know. Anyway, it was beautiful. The Church of Jesus Christ is known as a church that emphasizes making covenants with God. Covenants are inherent in each of the ordinances of salvation and exaltation this restored church administers. The ordinance of baptism and its associated covenants are required for entrance into the celestial kingdom. The ordinance and associated covenants of the temple are requirements for exaltation in the celestial kingdom, which is eternal life in the greatest, the gift of all the gifts of God. That is the focus of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yep.
I thought that was beautifully said, poorly read by me, but then even more eloquently explained with the promises that President Nelson gives of that nowhere else can you receive this and this and this and this than in the temple.
Right.
It seems like every talk was about the temple. It seemed like
it was a lot. There was a lot of talks on that, on the restoration of priesthood keys and authority. I mean, because it really is what sets. First of all, if you're talking to just a Protestant, I mean, one of the reasons why what we believe is so different is that we not only believe that there are certain works that you have to perform, we believe there's lots of them, all the way up to temple covenants. And again, part of the problem is we're talking past each other, because a Protestant is talking about salvation from hellfire. And to them, there's only two options. You're burning in hell forever, or you're in the presence of God forever. And that's it. And when you die, you're either burning in hell forever, although you will be, in a hard way. It is actually, Protestants struggle to try to describe what happens in between the time when you die and when you're resurrected, and why actually you are resurrected when you're already in hell, but then you're resurrected to be put back into hell, so you could more exquisitely burn in hell because you were already in hell. So is that first hell not as bad as second hell? Is second hell like first hell is I have to go camping, second hell is I'm camping and it's with Gerrit because he's the worst camper on earth? Is that second hell? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
you desperately need a bowline hitch, and Garrett's the only guy that can give it to you.
Yeah, and you look over at him, and he's got that patch on his merit badge, bandolero, but it's not. It's not. It doesn't mean much. You got that one at a scout camp with a very lazy merit badge council. Let's call that. So. We talk past each other because we talk about salvation all the time, and we just don't mean the same thing. Latter-day Saints, as President Nelson, talked about, the church doesn't exist to get you out of hellfire. Right? We already believe that everyone except for the sons of perdition are all going to eventually go to heaven. What the church exists for is to provide the covenants and ordinances and instruction that you need in order to be exalted, because that's the purpose of this life. And, my brother texted me when Elder Kieran was talking about how he's like, well, Elder Kieran just committed the greatest Calvinist heresy of all time because he said that Jesus died for everyone and that he wants every single person to be saved. Well, that's it. You're out. But it is. I was texting another friend. I'm like, it's amazing to be a Latter-day Saint. It's awesome. It's an awesome thing to have a theology that makes sense. Sure, I don't have all the answers to everything, but I understand the purpose of life. Not just, because God created me. Because what's the next question? Why did God create me? To bring himself glory. Okay, that doesn't sound very good, especially when you're suffering, right? You understand why, you understand who you are. And that first and foremost, God didn't create you out of nothing. You're an eternal being. You're an eternal being that made a decision, and that was brought up multiple times. Actually, trials were talked about a lot in conference today, I felt like. That you made a choice to come to this earth, and that you have agency that affects your eternal outcomes. So I hope that we can always focus on that, because it is easy to get confused by the sounds of the world and people saying things like, well, I know a lot of people that aren't members and they're a lot better than anyone. Look, there are no doubt billions of people on this world that are better people than I am. It's not about whether or not someone is a good person or not. There are incredibly good people who are not members of the church. The church doesn't exist to try to make everyone a good person. Jesus Christ's gospel, even in its various, iterations throughout Christianity alone, but so does other world religions, also make people better people. So religion in and of itself makes people better people. So that's not the purpose of the church. The purpose of the church is to provide sacred ordinances whereby you can achieve your highest possible potential. So when someone's like, well, I feel like I can be closer to God just reading the Bible on my own. Well, first of all, I'm sorry you've had such a bad experience with religion that you feel like that's the case. Second of all, no doubt, if you just go and read your Bible every day, you are going to be a better person and you're going to be closer to God. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about becoming like our Father in heaven. Not just being a better person, which is great. If that's all you're going to do that. But we're talking about the ordinances that allow us to reach the potential of the entire purpose why we were here in the first place. Why does this life exist? So that men and women can become like their Heavenly Father and their Heavenly Mother. And how do they do it? Through ordinances. So I thought it was awesome. This is way too long for a bonus episode. Sorry, everybody. We got on to tell you that you need to delete last week's episode and probably the entire thing from your phone, and then re-download that episode so that we sound, the content is, as Richard said, poor but still better sounding. And we ended up waxing a little philosophical, but hopefully everyone had a good time at conference. It's great to rejuvenate, and hopefully we will bring you an uncorrupted audio file later this week
on Thursday.
Well, there's no promises though.
No. It'll be the same. It'll be the same.
Yeah, Richard doesn't have any third world vacations planned yet, or that I know of, but it'll happen. It's coming. One other thing that's kind of exciting is I'm going to be on the Follow Him podcast later this week. On April 10th, that episode is going to drop. So most of you are probably familiar with it. I assume everybody listening to this is always wishing.
Follow Him. Tell me who does that?
Hank Smith and John, by the way. Yeah.
I've not heard of them, but I'm sure they do a good job.
Yeah. You and the millions upon millions of other people who listen to them. So if you, I assume, like I said, that everyone's both familiar with them and listens to them quite a bit. But I will be their guest on the episode that's dropping on April 10th. So
that's awesome. What was the topic? By the way, I'm a huge Hank Smith and John, by the way, fan. Grew up listening to. I grew up. I mean, John, by the way, had a lot of popularity and several. They would have been tapes at the time that I listened to in my youth, and he
you mean 8 tracks or
John, by the way, and Truman G. Madsen, those two people.
I'm surprised you didn't have them on vinyl.
Well, what did you talk about when you went on the show?
So it's the part of Jacob and Words of Mormon. Oh, it's part of the Jacob, Enos, Jeremiah, and then Words of Mormon. So it's really Enos
kind of setting up the small plates a little bit, talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fun part about that is, I love the Words of Mormon aspect of the gold plates translation, because that's, you suddenly dive back into church history with Doctrine and Covenants section 10 and Doctrine and Covenants section 3, and also a little bit of Doctrine and Covenants section 5 related to the lost, stolen pages of the translation. So
that'd be
I'm
awesome.
on there. I'm sure they edited a great deal, so I actually don't know what I'm saying at this point. But hey, if it sounds good, great. And if not, just remember, they must have edited whatever good part I said out.
Well, they've done a lot. They've done a lot for us, and so it's nice to give back to them.
Sure.
By promoting their podcast.
I'm pretty certain that, like I said,
the million listens they get to per week, we just maybe add 2 or 3 more listeners.
Yeah, there are like 4 or 5 people listening. Like, I guess I'll give them a try. At least they won't sound like they're recording from a cave.
I will say this does put a lot of pressure on our free episode on Thursday. It can't be the normal garbage that we put out there, right? Because people will maybe hear about the podcast and go and listen, and now the first episode that they hear is the one produced in a cave. about.
It would be great timing for us, actually, that the first one that they listened, the first time they download is the cave one. That'll be great. Maybe we could do one on polygamy while we're at it. Let's just bat 1,000 around here. So anyway, hopefully if you get a chance to listen to that, I don't know exactly how I sound, but if you are interested in that, you can check that out. Thanks so much, everybody, for your patience. Sorry that we occasionally get it wrong, and by that I mean always, but we sure love the gospel, and we love all the support you guys give us. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Standard of Truth podcast, hosted by historian Dr. Gerrit Dirkmaat. If you know anybody that could benefit from the material in this episode, please share it with them. And for more resources, visit standardoftruth.com. Until next time.